We're now seeing entire chunks of the Orc Codex get leaked to the internet. Let's take a look at those clan cultures and all the new stratagems from the new book. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where we've been looking at the new Orc reveals over the last few days. And now, in a rather bizarre move, Games Workshop's Warhammer 40k app seems to have messed up a bit, and for a limited time, quite a lot of people had access to the entire Orc Codex within the app, giving us the vast majority of the details of the Codex. It does mean that all of the information is just a little bit scattergun at the moment, quite a lot of slightly incomplete things coming out, and it's kind of hard to put them all into context. I thought it might be worth starting with the Orc clan cultures and the stratagems though, both of which seem to have leaked in full. So for the Orc clan cultures, we seem to have their standard culture, their warlord trait and their stratagem, though I've not personally seen any of the relics yet. Out of the list it seems like a big buff for Goths, and quite a big nerf to both Evil Sons and Death Skulls, which were two of the strongest traits before. It's great news for the Goths though. Their trait is now exploding sixes in combat all the time, and their sixes get them extra hits, not just extra attacks, and then even on top of that they also get +1 strength on the charge. If you're playing melee orcs, Goths really do seem like they're perhaps the way to go now. Exploding sixes is usually going to be a 25% melee increase, and +1 strength is going to be relevant against a lot of targets, particularly standard boys going to strength 5. Their warlord trait is proper killy, +1 attack and -1 AP in melee, no bad things on a war boss, though they do seem to have lost the Scar Boys as their stratagem is 2 command points now, allowing a Goth core or character to get extra hits on 5s rather than 6s. Again, should normally be an extra 25% increase in melee. I'm not sure if that's normally going to be worth it for 2 CP though. Overall though, Goths seem great, particularly as they have access to a fair few other characters too. Death Skulls on the other hand really have come down in the world. They used to get to reroll 1 hit, wound and damage result. Now unfortunately it's just literally 1 hit or wound roll. They picked up a 5+ feel no pain against mortal wounds, they lost their army-wide 6+ invul, and retained their infantry keeping Obsec. They seem massively weaker to me, I'm afraid. The Obsec infantry is pretty big on things like Storm Boys or Commandos, but they won't be anywhere near as strong at damage dealing as they were before. Their trait Opportunist has changed a little bit. You can still ignore Lookout Sir with less than 12 inches away. But now it's been quite weird that if you kill an enemy vehicle within 6 inches of this war boss, you gain 1 command point. Presumably that's the boss doing a bit of looting himself. Finally, for 2 command point, their Wrecker's stratagem is still +1 to wound against vehicles, and it can be used in the shooting or fight phase. Could be worth it depending on the target. Snakebites were quite underwhelming before. They've been quite buffed as we've already seen on Warhammer Community. They can only be wounded on a 4+ if they're targeted by anything less than strength 8. With boys going to toughness 5, it's only going to be relevant on things that are strength 6 or strength 7, so not enormous, but quite helpful against those. Maybe more powerful is their +1 to wound on the charge for squig units. If you want to go crazy with those squig hog riders, then the snakebites might be the clan for you. Their warlord trait allows them to get up when they die on the roll of a 4+ with D3 wounds remaining. Finally, Mystic Chanting for 1 CP is a new one that allows you to deny a psychic power as if you were a psyker with any snakebite unit. Quite nice to have a little bit of army-wide psychic defense. Moving on, freebooters have had a decent buff. The core of their culture stays the same. They get +1 to hits provided your army has killed 1 enemy unit earlier in that phase, but now there's no longer the range restriction on it. It can literally affect the entire army. Could make them really quite powerful for really big games, weirdly enough. The bigger the game, the more likely you're going to be killing a unit each phase, and you'll get at least some buff from this culture. Their trait is Killer Reputation, a morale manipulation one. Enemies within 3 inches have -1 leadership and combat attrition, and friendly units within 6 inches get +1 leadership. Really quite relevant as mob rule's been heavily nerfed. I'm afraid you don't get to count the leadership of the number of models in the unit anymore, so this will be really quite relevant. Their stratagem for 1 command point is Get Dilute, being able to turn on Obsec for any infantry units, and I'd say that that's quite a significant one. You can ignore it if it's not going to make a difference, or turn it on when needed. Evil Sons have seen quite a big nerf. Their clan culture was previously +1 to move, advance and charge, but they've lost the charge element of that. It's just +1 to move and advance, or +2 inches to move if you're speed freaks. They do get to advance and shoot assault weapons still, but it's really not that relevant anymore because a lot of the Orc weapons went to Daka weapons, and Daka weapons don't appear to be assault weapons. It means that that bit is really quite niche now, only affecting certain weapons such as custom Mega Blasters. Their warlord trait is Faster Than Use, and that one seems like quite a good one. you get to pick one unit within 6 inches, and that unit can advance and charge. Could be good for cannonballing some warbikes into the enemy on turn 1. Finally, their stratagem for 1 CP is Drive-By Dakka, and it allows a vehicle unit to shoot and then move in the shooting phase after. Potentially a bit of jump shoot jump shenanigans there, or just flat more movement. Movement isn't bad, but these guys are no longer anywhere near as strong as they were. Next up, Bad Moons have also changed a fair bit. Their clan culture now gives them a plus 6 inch range to Dakka and heavy weapons now, so they don't get the reroll ones to hit, but they should have a better choice of targets at range. On top of that, any 6s to wound that they get will get an extra AP-1 boost, and that will usually be strongest on low strength, high rate of fire weapons, things like shooters. As for the relative strength, it depends on what they're targeting. Overall though, I think they'll get a little bit less damage on average, but have a better choice of where they apply it with that extra range. Their Warlord trait, best armor that the teeth can buy, that gives them a 4+ invul and a +1 to their saving throws. And for 1 CP, you can put a little bit of extra damage on shooting units. Showing off allows exploding 6s when they shoot. It's for core units and characters firing Dakka weapons, and each unmodified hit roll of 6 scores 1 additional hit. That's actually far more powerful than the old Dakka rule. Usually orcs tend to hit on 5s, so that'll mean an extra 50% damage increase out of that unit. That could be pretty insane on something like orc warbikes, who appear to pump out 10 Dakka gunshots at half range now, so a crazy amount of firepower. Finally, we have the Blood Axes, who really haven't changed all that much. They get light cover if they're greater than 18 inches away, and get to either shoot or charge after they've fallen back, so they're a bit more flexible in melee. Not really all that overwhelming in my opinion. It wasn't really taken all that much before. Their Warlord trait's really good though. It allows them to redeploy or put in strategic reserve 3 units that you've already deployed on the field, so better allows you to anticipate what the opponent's doing turn 1. Finally, Dead Sneaky also allows you to use strategic reserves. If you put an infantry unit within 3 inches of the edge of the board, for 1 command points they can re-enter strategic reserve. Overall, for the core clans, I feel like the Goths really are the winners here. Those boosts are great on already decent orc melee units. The Snakebites are really quite interesting if you're spamming loads of squigs, and then for a more shooty orc army, I think it's either Freebooters or Bad Moons. Moving on, we come to the Orc Stratagems. Unfortunately, it does look like this section has some hefty nerfs to the orcs in. The Fights Again stratagem appears to be gone, as does Endless Green Tide, the one that allows you to potentially redeploy a big squad of orc boys. Flying Headbutt from the Burner Bomber also seems to have disappeared, so I guess no more using those planes as a 1-turn nuke, and a few others have gone missing as well, such as their biggest boss. First up, we have more Dakka for 2 CP, that allows Dakka weapons to count as half range even if they aren't. Potentially powerful on a huge unit of shooter boys maybe. That'd be an extra 30 shooter shots on a max mob, and could be potentially worth a couple of command points. Seems like that could be quite powerful on warbikes and deathcopters as well, who get a crazy amount of Dakka gun shots. Next up we have Ramming Speed for 2 CP, that one's pretty much unchanged. 3d6 inch charge for a vehicle, so really reliable out of reserves if you need it, and when they make contact on a 2+ they deal d3 mortal wounds. There's a return of quite a fun one with Kareen. It allows an orc vehicle to move 6 inches before being destroyed or exploding, particularly good on things like trucks, as it could mean that you could reposition your boys before they get out. It costs 2 command points on battle wagons or Titanics, but 1 CP on everything else. For 2 CP we have Cloud of Smoke. You use this on a Speed Freak vehicle unit, and then that Speed Freak vehicle unit is -1 to hit, as are all Speed Freaks less than 6 inches away from them. Could be good to put on one of those boggy squads in the middle of the army, and then have it apply to all the boggies nearby. For 2 CP we have Hit 'em Harder, that's +1 damage for Mega Knobs in melee, a bit unfortunately going up to 2 CP from 1 I'm afraid. Still could be worth it on 3 wound infantry, but a bit less good value otherwise. For 1 CP we have Lumbering Strides. You use that on the Morka or Gorkanaut or the Stomper, and it's sort of a bit like the old Here We Go rules, where you can opt to reroll one of the dices out of the charge rather than the whole thing. I'd want to use this if I rolled a 6-on-1 result and still failed the charge, as that could hopefully give you a much increased chance of making contact. Next for 2 CP we have Breaking Heads. This is an option for auto-passing morale when a unit fails it less than 3 inches away from knobs or war bosses. You use this after you've failed the test, so you do still have a chance to pass. Then that unit takes d3 mortal wounds and the test is considered to be passed. Could be good to save something important like a Mega Knob or something, and it might well be more relevant on big boy squads as well, again as mob rule isn't really as big a deal. For 1 CP we have Burn 'em All. You use this after you've fired a Scorcher rocket from a burner bomber, and each unit within 3 inches takes 1 mortal wound after you have resolved the damage. Could be handy if your opponent has an enormous unit that's within 3 inches of loads of things. For 1 CP we have Get Stuck In Lads for boys and Beast Snagger boys. It gives them plus 3 inches to pilot and consolidation, a lot better for any sort of charge or fight phase shenanigans, and it costs 2 CP if you use it on a unit that's 11 models or more. For 2 CP we have Gun Crazy Show-Offs. That's a flash git stratagem, and potentially quite a powerful one as well, as it just allows them to shoot again, though they must target the closest unit. Now Bad Moons lost their shoot again stratagem, this one might have a bit more relevance. With a big unit and appropriate target closest, it could easily be worth the 2 CP. Next we have Snagger Grapple, again a 2 command point one. This one's used on Beast Snagger boys, and it gives you quite a powerful chance to lock an enemy unit in melee. You roll a dice when an enemy unit tries to fall back. On a 4+, they're unable to, and must remain locked in combat, hopefully to meet a grisly end at the hands of those Strength 5 choppers. That could be very nasty in the wrong circumstances. For 1 CP we have Tankbuster Bomb. A unit must have the keyword to access that. The model just makes the one attack, and if it hits the vehicle, then they suffer 2d3 mortal wounds. I'm sure Tankbusters will have the keyword, I'm not sure if basic boys will too yet. Next for 1 command point we have Cut In Flames. This is one to give burner boys AP-2 in melee, which is kind of interesting that it's just become a stratagem now. It used to be an innate ability on the burner boys, so it's perhaps not the best now that you actually have to pay for it in CP. Taken in greater context though, I still think that burner boys look improved in the new codex. They stayed 11 points, gained toughness 5, and also their burners finally have D6 shots now, so they're far tougher and almost twice as good in the shooting phase at no additional cost. Finally for the first half, we have a 2 CP one called Da Big A Day Is, which allows a Beast Snagger war boss, either that Beast boss, the one on the Squigosaur, or presumably Mogrog Scragbat, and they'll get plus 2 damage against any Titanic units that they're in combat with. Could potentially be pretty awesome to see a Beast boss just have a go at soloing a knight. Moving on, we have Extra Goblins and Big Boss. They're the standard extra relics and warlord trait stratagems. You can have up to 2 of each on a Strike Force game. Perhaps most interestingly, Force Field Booster. This one really does keep the custom force field alive. It's 2 command points to make the custom force field 9-inch in aura range, and also provide a 5+ invul save to enemy shooting. This means for 2 CP, your big mech with a custom force field can still protect an absolutely enormous section of the Orc army with that 5+ invul save, even now everything's gone to toughness 5. What's best about this is that the Orc units don't have to be wholly within 9 inches anymore, so you only have to have one model in the unit just towing into this aura, and they still get the 5+ invul. Maybe one that you could budget command points for a turn or two, and then not bother in the later turns when it doesn't really matter. Next up we have Teleporter, 2 CP to Deep Striker non-monster Orc unit with a power level or 20 or less. 1 CP for Tide of Muscle, allowing you to ignore modifiers on a charge. That one could be quite powerful if your opponent is holed up in some difficult terrain. For 2 CP, Orcs is Never Beaten still remains. That's the one to allow a character to fight in death, though now it is only if they haven't already fought that turn, so not quite as good as it was before. That's the same change that the Space Marines got with their similar fight in death stratagem. For 1 CP, we have Unstoppable Momentum. This one's quite a cool one for a Smasher Squig. They get 5 dice to deal the chance of having a mortal wound on a 4+, so there is at least a small chance that they might kill what they charged even before they get to fight. If that happens, then for 1 command point you can declare a charge all over again, get another batch of mortal wound impact hits, and maybe go and chop up something else with your big chopper. Seems like quite a nice one, that one. That one could be really powerful if you do manage to finish off a light unit with it. For 2 CP, Grot Shields became a little bit more easy to use. You have to declare it at the start of the enemy shooting phase, and you basically say that you're protecting 1 Orc unit. Provided the Gretchen unit is within 6 inches of that unit, enemies can just flat up not target the unit that's shielded, provided there's at least 1 Gretchen model closer. Maybe a bit annoying to have to declare it beforehand, but it now does give absolute complete shooting immunity until the Gretchen die. If big squads of looters, tank busters or flash gits become a big thing, this could potentially be a good incentive to run a lot of grots. Next we have 1 CP for the Ground Shaker shells. That's a heavy lobber buff for the kill rig. Once the heavy lobber has shot, if it targets an enemy that's non-titanic and doesn't have fly, they get half movement and -2 to advance and charge. Not at all bad for 1 CP. That looks like a definite advantage of taking a kill rig along. Being able to just throw that out on a big heavy unit is really quite a spanner in the works. Rounding off quite strong, we have a couple of powerful ones for the Beast Snaggers, and it does seem that they get a version of transhuman physiology. For 2 CP, a Beast Snagger unit can only be wounded on a 4+, regardless of any other special rules that the enemy might have, such as things that allow them to wound on 2s or bonuses to wounds. Really quite powerful if you have a Beast Snagger unit that's going to get targeted by some heavy guns, though I would bear in mind it might not be quite as relevant as compared with Space Marines, as Orks already are quite hard to wound anyway, with toughness 5 or greater on every unit. Still, certainly that looks like it will be a powerful defensive stratagem. Finally, we have Monster Hunters. You target 1 vehicle or monster unit, and 3 Beast Snagger units of your choice get +1 to wound against that target. That's really going to be a good 1-2 punch with the +1 to hit the Beast Snagger units get against them anyway. Going to make it very easy indeed to drag down the enemy's big nasties. Overall, I think there are some really quite powerful choices in this, but I do think that largely the stratagem section has been toned down compared with the previous codex. Orks had some crazy powerful buffs before, such as shooting twice, fighting twice, and regenerating huge squads of orcs, and a lot of that is just flat out gone now. I feel like perhaps the theme of this Ork Codex is that maybe big buffs aren't going to be quite as big a thing, but the units are just going to be a bit stronger and more efficient, just based on their points cost and their datasheet abilities. So let me know what you think of the leaks down in the comments below. I'll certainly try and make a few more videos on the leaks and review the Ork Codex in its entirety once it comes out. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see that. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next for the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, the link is down in the video description, so feel free to check it out if you'd like to. In any case, an absolutely enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.